All right. So we did experience a little bit of technical difficulty. This program was supposed to be live streamed to our YouTube, but what we're going to be doing instead tonight is we're going to be recording. You'll notice that we already are recording. Is yours still recording, Eric?
Yep.
Good. Great. So just so you guys know, this will be live recorded. Then we'll turn the recording off after the artist talk with Daphne and Warren. And then we'll do kind of a more intimate discussion together. All right, without further ado, I'm going to get started with things. Welcome, my name is Sarah and I'm the Education Assistant at Dunlop Art Gallery, part of Regina Public Library. Welcome to Global Beading Circle with Daphne Boyer and Warren Cariou, where we will be hearing about their beading, kinship, and storytelling. To our viewers, you're invited to work on your own beading, drawing, or coloring project while listening, and stay tuned for a private discussion after the live stream has ended. For those of you who wish to join the Zoom discussion, please follow the Zoom link that has been posted into the comments section. So I'd like to start by acknowledging that Dunlop Art Gallery, Regina Public Library, myself, and the lands on which we're virtually gathered on this evening are situated on Treaty 4 territory, the original lands of the Cree, Ojibwe, Saulteaux, Dakota, Nakota, Lakota, and the homeland of the Métis Nation. So I'd love to take a moment to introduce Daphne and Warren. Daphne Boyer is grateful to work, live, and play on the traditional territory of the Lekwungen peoples, including the Songhees and the Esquimalt nations and the Wasatch peoples, whose historical relationship to the land continues to this day. Daphne Boyer is a renowned visual artist and plant scientist, born and raised in Saskatchewan and now living in Victoria. Her interactive practice combines plant material, high-resolution digital tools, and women's traditional handwork to create art that celebrates her family's Métis heritage and honors plants as the basis of life on Earth. Her exhibition at Tipismak, sorry, I pronounced that wrong, Tipismak, which is People Who Live by Their Own Rules, is on display at Dunlop Art Gallery in the Central Library until September 10th. Warren Cariou lives and works on Treaty 1 territory, the territories of the Anishinaabe, Cree, Dakota, Dene, Métis, and Oji Cree nations, and is also the ancestral and the traditional homeland of the Anishinaabe peoples. Warren Cariou is a writer, photographer, and a professor based in Winnipeg. His focus on the environmental philosophies and oral traditions of Indigenous peoples in Western Canada, especially in connection with his Métis roots. He has published works of memoir, fiction, poetry, and film, and his bitumen photographs have been exhibited and published nationally. He has also edited numerous books of Indigenous literature and storytelling. He teaches in the Department of English, Theatre, Film, and Media at the University of Manitoba. Welcome, Daphne and Warren.
Thank you, Sarah, for that wonderful introduction. And hi, Warren. It's great to see you. Great to see you all.
Hi, it's wonderful to be here. And yes, I guess one thing about our intros, well, thank you very much for those intros. One other thing that people may not know is that we're first cousins, Daphne and I. So it's a particular honor for me to be here to help celebrate this amazing exhibition that she's created.
Well, and thank you, Warren. Warren actually wrote the introduction to the show, which really enriched the content. I mean, it really was quite amazing to have him make all these links between our shared family history and grandma, who I'm sure we'll get to talking about in a few minutes if we hang in there. So, Sarah, do you want me to take over? Is that the next
That would be great, and I'm going to just get this PowerPoint up for you as well.
Okay, great. So thank you all for being here. Maybe what I'll do is just start out by telling you what a wonderful experience it's been for me to work with this team at the Dunlop Art Gallery. It's just been so enriching. They've supported me in many ways to do things that I never thought I would ever do, period, let alone do them all in about 10 weeks' time. So kudos to them all. They're a great team, and if you know of any visual artists or any artists that were looking for places to show their work, I'd put them at the top of the list. So it's been a really wonderful experience and a pleasure. And unfortunately, for a number of reasons, I wasn't able to make the planned trip. So this conversation would have normally happened in person, but we're going to have it here today. And I guess the advantage is I think it might be recorded, so that's good. For those of you who, I'm not sure who I'm talking to or what's known about my work, but I just like to take a few minutes, and I'm actually going to set a timer here so that I don't take any more than a few minutes, to talk about my work. And Sarah, you can begin to scroll through these photos. I recently moved from Quebec to Victoria, and I started out, I began working full-time as an artist in 2017. And my practice has evolved out of, if we can just start with his photos, or here, Rob. Are you going to navigate them, Sarah, or do you want me to do it?
Yeah, just not showing up for some reason here. Let me try this again.
Oh, well, I'll just keep talking anyway.
Okay.
So basically, here there is some shots coming up there, photographs of what a process that led to what I'm doing now. So it's a bit of historical, just a bit of a flashback here. That's me picking or looking for berries on Mount Royal in Montreal, where we lived, and I spent a whole summer. I got a grant from the Conseil des Arts et Lettres de Québec, which was a wonderful thing, and it decided that I was going to use berries in a real way to bead with. And that's what's showing here is me picking berries. This is the cemetery on Mount Royal, any of you who know the cemetery. And we can just breeze through them, Sarah. And basically what happened, that's Lena Samakova, who's my right-hand assistant in making all of the works I make. Basically what I started out doing was picking berries and treating them as if I was processing for production to make jam or whatever. And with the intention of actually beating them. So we can move on through these. There's a little story that should go with some of these. The little white berries here, which if you look up closely at them, look like pumpkins. And here they are in the kitchen. Well, those turned out to be poison ivy berries. And my husband ended up with poison ivy all up his arms. He came home, and I had the habit of collecting plant material and sticking it in the fridge so it wouldn't age so quickly. Forgot to tell him. He went digging around looking for vegetables. Anyway, I will never do that again. But it makes an interesting story. So what I did was I started to process these berries. I dyed them in coffee and tea and all sorts of other things, and strung them on wire. And we can move on. Maybe there's some pictures, and took a very much a scientist's approach to doing this, but basically ended up with either jam or dried berries on my desk. It was a disaster. Months of work, carefully doing this. I mean, it looks great now, but in these images. But a few days later, they began to shrivel and crack. I tried covering them with acrylic and all sorts of other things, but it was basically a major faceplant, and I was quite discouraged by it all. You can see what details we went into looking for the Holy Grail on how to do this. But ultimately, what it led me to understand was that I could photograph the berries in a very particular way, and I won't give away my trade secret, but I had these months spent doing this made me realize that, in fact, there's another route. And so I took that route and began to test that. You can see this photograph just shows how late we worked into the night, because when you pick these berries, you had to process them very quickly, and what we were doing was time consuming. So, all right, let's just move right through those quickly, Sarah, and then I'll move on to the next round. See, there they are dried. Those are the dried berries, which they weren't intended to be dried, but that's what I ended up with. So we can move on then to the more recent works. So this illustrates what I've done more recently with the photographic process, and this is a version of the Métis hunting flag, which apparently the Métis flew when they were on hunting expeditions. This one's made with cranberries and hawthorns. Our grandpa grew hawthorns as a hedge, cut them short so that there were long thorns on them and the cattle couldn't get out, or coyotes and others couldn't get into. It created a living hedge. So we can go on to the next one. And this is the poison ivy and hawthorn version, the one that, these are the leaves. They're really stunningly beautiful. And I didn't really realize that how dramatically the plant changed and how incredibly diverse it can be from one region to the other. This was a tall vine, and anyway, just misidentified. So, but it turned into a nice work. This one's called Hung Out to Dry. It's up at the Dunlop as well. Basically, I like to put my hand in some of the works and not just be working digitally. This started out as photographs of leaves on Mount Royal in Montreal, and then through various iterations ended up being this wall-up piece that is reminiscent of how vines grow in the forest, but also, as far as I'm concerned, reflects on the way Indigenous people have been treated in so-called Canada. So we can move on to the next one. This is called All My Relations, and it is one of 3 works that I made when my mother died in 2017. She had a wonderful death, and this work was made in honor of her. And Warren will know that Mum carried stories. She was the main archivist of our family, and she very much, I think, swam against the current in our family and never gave up on the idea that we were Métis and from Indigenous ancestry, and she took a lot of flack for it. So this work really reflects the stories that Mum carried and told us about. Okay, we can move on. This is another version of what I called Berries to Beads, what became Berries to Beads. So again, a photographic work that is part of a larger work that I saw initially at the Manitoba Museum, and it undertook beading. Do we have a picture of that one, Sarah, the long narrow one? Yeah, keep going, yeah. Okay, not there. I guess it would be in my recent works. Anyway, it was a beautiful long beaded moss bag beading that inspired those textile works, and there's one of them behind me here. But I fell in love with it. It's used to teach beading at the Manitoba Museum. Dr. Maureen Matthews uses it as a teaching tool. And when I fell in love with it, I decided to do some components and went on to bead the whole thing. I work as part of a team. I don't do all of this myself. I have a team of technical experts that we've devised this technique together through residencies, and we work as a team to produce the work, and I feel really fortunate to have them on board. Okay, so why don't I just, that gives you a bit of an idea of what I'm doing, and maybe we can just move on to the 2021 works, which are my more recent works and that are not, in fact, in the Dunlop collection. So here we are. This is a tent that's called the birthing tent, and our great-grandma, Eleanor Amelin was her name, was a midwife on the Northern Great Plains, and her second marriage was where our grandma, Clémence, was born from that marriage. She had 5 daughters, and they lived on a trading post. Our great-grandpa was a fur trader and a hunter himself, a trapper, and he would often leave home and Eleanor would leave home as well. She would go and stay with the mother's, the pregnant woman who was about to give birth. And I think she probably really liked to get away from home because they lived in a small place. And I mean, think about it, the status as a medicine woman versus that of a mom of 5 in a small house. So away she'd go, summer and winter. And our grandma, who was probably, she was extremely a fierce person, and she was instructed to answer the door with a gun. And the reason was because there was a railway spur being built quite close to their house, and a house full of girls and migrant workers. People didn't know them. So they felt a danger that's very real today too, in the extractive economies in Canada for Indigenous women. So Grandma grew up, armed with a gun, meeting whoever came to the door. When the parents weren't home, that's what Grandma would do. So she and her mother were highly independent, and it's still a mystery to me as to how they maintained that autonomy and fierceness in rather patriarchal times. So this work it has the oxytocin molecule beaded using my berries to beads technique on the roof of the canopy of the work. This is the COVID version of the work. The original one was supposed to have walls and really create a closed-in space. But it has worked out very well. It's on in this show called On Beaded Ground, currently at the Legacy Gallery here. And each of the ribbons represents one of the children that great-grandma helped birth. And there's a lot more detail to say about this, but I want to move on. So I think there's a couple more that may be worthwhile commenting on. Is there another one in here? Oh, yes. But there we see the molecules. You can see that. So this actually is a valid molecular representation. I have a friend who's a scientist in Montreal who guided us. There's a few tweaks made to get it on this velvet canopy, and the background to the images is made with blueberries. So I set it up so that it would look like combinations of constellations, and also reflect the genealogical connections between things and the connections between all things. So I think I'll wrap it up there, and we'll take a minute or two to listen to Warren. Oh, okay. These are more 2021. 2021 was a busy year. Oh, there's one. I wanted to introduce our grandma. So this is Clemence at age 80 at least. Do you remember this, Warren? Do you remember her going on that trip?
Yes, I very much remember. She always wanted to go to the Holy Land, as she called it, and she got this opportunity. I mean, her kids all put in money to be able to make this possible. And this is her in I'm not sure where exactly, but close to Jerusalem, I think.
She went on a bus tour from Vancouver, right? She took a bus tour from Vancouver. Is that, did I have
Well,
this
I think
right?
this is her in the Middle East, if I'm not
Yeah.
mistaken. Yeah.
But it was she went as part of a bus tour. Like I think
Oh,
she
I
went with
think
a
that's
group of
true. Yes,
people.
there were other
Yeah.
folks there, yeah, from
Yeah.
Vancouver as well. You're right.
So Grandma was a big time adventurer, and I can remember her coming back from this trip or another one. She had a huge, long McGavin's bread bag full of photographs, and we came home from school, a gang of girlfriends. There was Grandma sitting at the table, plopped her photographs down on the table, and started telling stories. Our friends were spellbound for hours after school. She was a remarkable storyteller. Yeah. So I'll pass it over to you, Warren.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, so wonderful to see the progression of your art. You know, and for me, and I've known you all my life, but just to see that in that brief account you gave is really wonderful for me to see too, and to think about where your work has come from, and also where it's headed. It's so exciting.
Thank you.
I think though this is all about beadwork today, and I'm not a beadworker, but I am an appreciator of it very much, and so I'm wearing in honor of that. I'm wearing my beaded vest that was made by the Dene elder Mary Jane Francois, who is from Yellowknives First Nation, and just absolutely amazing work. And beadwork, means so much to people, and people become so attached to the particular patterns on the work that they wear, whether they've created it themselves or whether someone in their family has made it. For me, as someone from your family, Daphne, it's so wonderful to see these patterns that connect me, to you and to our family in a way as well, and just to see what you have done with reshaping these patterns and finding a new language for expressing how beads can stand in for nature, and how, in this case, how the natural materials are standing in for beads. It's just all so fascinating to me. And so I had such a great time writing the catalog piece about the show for that reason. There's so much more that I could have said, but it was wonderful to have that opportunity to think through this work. Yeah, so I mean, there's lots of things I would like to talk with you about today, but I guess maybe we've got Grandma there, and I would maybe there's a couple of more images that I would like to show that are work that Grandma did. So she, as Daphne said, Grandma was a very practical, down to earth, quite stern person at times. She raised 15 children, much of that time on her own, and she had a fierceness about her, and we as kids were a bit scared of her at times. But she also was an incredibly she had an incredible love for life, and an appreciation of the things of the natural world. She loved blueberries. She loved pickerel, and she was a kind of sensualist almost, even though she, that seems strange in relation to the fierceness that she exuded as well. But I just wanted to show a couple of examples of her, what I think of as very much her artwork as well. And this is a footstool that Grandma made, and it's still up at our cabin in north of Meadow Lake, where we still use it. She was sitting in her rocking chair at the cabin, and she felt she needed something to put her feet on, so she decided to create this artwork, a very practical thing, which she started with a nabob coffee can, and then she just knit this incredibly long bolster of Fentex, this indestructible polypropylene material, and wound it together into this footstool. Maybe the only knitted footstool in the world. But anyway, I think it actually just reminds me of some of the patterns in your work too, Daphne. So when I was thinking about your work, it reminded me of this. And I guess if you could show the next image as well, it's another piece that I have that Grandma made, which is that similar kind of a swirl pattern, and again made of that indestructible Fentex. And that I've got it right here. I always keep that on my desk as a memento of Grandma. One last thing I wanted to talk about, as I mentioned, the way in which beadwork we can have such personal attachments and connections to it. And I just want to show an example of a moccasin vamp that means a lot to me. These are my moccasins that were made for me by Thelma Bird. And Thelma lives in Pewanak, Ontario, in the Winnisk First Nation. And she has Métis ancestry and is also a Mushkegowuk Cree. And her husband, Louis Bird, is one of my great, I guess, knowledge keepers for me and for many, many people. And he has been so important in my journey as someone who's devoted to Indigenous storytelling. And so this is a pattern that I asked her to create a flower beadwork pattern, because that is the Métis style in the old days anyway. And so I just love how she did this. And every time I wear these moccasins, I think of Thelma and I think of Louis, and it just connects me to them. They live so far away. We don't see them very often, talk on the phone a lot, but that connection that pattern gives me, it really, it just is, it's a comfort. It's like your friend or your relative is right there with you. So I think that's just a wonderful thing about beadwork.
And that's a really beautiful pattern too. It kind of looks like it's dancing, doesn't it?
It really does. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a
Just
great sense of movement in her work.
yeah, really, really
Um,
wonderful movement. And even the little ripples, like where she's gathered the hide around the vamp. That's really very beautiful. Yeah,
Absolutely. Yeah.
yeah,
So I guess, we wanted to have a chat about some, uh, things that come up have come up already, and a few other things that we've talked about beforehand in our preparation. We're constantly visiting, so this has given us a good opportunity to visit even more. So I wonder if there are probably things that would like to take up, Daphne, but I just have a couple of questions that I would like to start off with, if that's okay.
sure.
Um, and one is in relation to scale and size. And this is so fascinating to me, how the work that inspired you is, and you showed that long beaded bag. Of course, those beads are tiny, and in fact, especially the older beads tend to be even smaller. And of course, in your work, when you're using the digital technology, you can change the size. And of course, even berries are larger than beads by orders of magnitude as well. Um, so yeah, I'm wondering what you're thinking about in relation to scale when you're doing your work, because when you see it in the gallery, some of it is extremely large, and you can actually see the shapes of individual berries, when the work is printed large. And so yeah, I'm really fascinated by that. And then thinking to the birthing tandem, where you show the oxytocin molecule there, and the tiny, but also how that looks so much like a constellation, and how large and small are interconnected so interestingly in your work.
Well, I'll do my best to answer that question. Um, Even though I'm prepared for it, I should do better than my best, but nonetheless. Um, Scale. I don't know. This creative process is kind of mysterious to me, and I'll tell you why. Is that I don't cook these ideas up. They just come to me. I see them, and then the big challenge is how in the world do I make them? And I think I can pretty easily credit Christy Belcourt and also hang on for a second, Andy Goldsworthy with my inspiration. I came to this art making business really late in life. I'm 66, and it's been 7 years or so since I've been doing it full time. But the works have always come to me like just as images, and I always knew that whatever I did, I wanted to be able to enlarge, because I do remember when I was studying plant science, and the first time I looked under a microscope, I thought these designs will one day make textile designs. And I think there's a connection there. A lot of this is unconscious, but I do think that it came from that. And um, in terms of the scale, I am trying to get us to focus in on some things on a story that, the history of Canada, the true history of Canada, that many of us have had in our face for a very long time, and yet we've managed to ignore, or we've denied it, like Grandma, our grandma who had sweetgrass in the glove compartment of her car, which, by the way, was a 1963 Mustang. Was it 63 or 67? Something like that, that she drove without a license. But we used to call her a senior delinquent in our household. But anyway, and Warren saw another side of Grandma. We really, Grandma was like, she was a really amazing character, and we better behave right now or we're all going to get it. But she was really something to behold, and we all loved her dearly. But some of us were more scared of her than Warren was. But anyway, the idea that I'm trying to bring something into focus that is otherwise not acknowledged. And so we need to enlarge it. We need to make these works bigger. We need to enlarge the story, and it's already happening. I mean, it's happening all around us. And the fact that I, at this age in my life, somebody who's not art educated, could actually be making art and putting it in galleries is a reflection of the fact that that change is happening, right? So I think that that is a bit of an explanation for how we end up working with scale. And I've always, my mom, as you know, Warren, Mom was really an extraordinary storyteller, and she had an incredible imagination, and she could also see beauty in anything. And I think that we spent a lot of time. Mom didn't drive. She dragged it, put little backpacks on us, and we'd head out to wherever on a walk onto the bald prairies, and Mom would have us, looking up close at, all sorts of bird eggs, and she was a self-taught naturalist, and just it was pretty amazing to experience the natural world with her. And it was up close and in your face. In fact, I brought this out more, and I have a few things to show you. This was one of Mom's favorite teacups, and if she was here, she'd pour you a cup of tea. And what she used to say about this teacup was, she would say, every girl deserves a cupful of posies. So I think that really, so that was my mom. And when and this is my mom and her best friend Neva, who were the equivalent of rock stars in the Broadway district of Saskatoon. I don't know if anybody's listening from Saskatoon, but both of them, who called themselves little old ladies, would head out on nature walks, and they literally stopped traffic in that area of, can you see, am I holding it up close enough? In the area, in the neighborhood that they lived in Nutana. They would be admiring some plant, and people would walk by and say, well, what are you looking at? And then whoever was with there would have their face right in a bush, and Mom and Neva would be talking about some aspect of nature. And a funny little twist is that Neva worked underground. She was a member of the Air Force in the Second World War. She worked underground with a group of, I think, 240 women, monitoring traffic, air traffic and boat traffic along the West Coast, where I now live. And they were actually stationed in this house that we now live in. The property was 5 acres at the time, and they lived in barracks. And the house that we live in on the top floor, in the servants' quarters where we live, was actually where the officers lived, and in the mess hall was. So Neva was a great friend. Unfortunately, she didn't make it through COVID. We talked every week, and I really miss them both dearly. And I got couple more things to show, just in my show and tell. So Warren will know this. So these are his books, and this is our grandma and grandpa on the cover, Clémence and Julien. So Julien was a French immigrant. There's some question in the family about, there was 20 years difference between them. And he, I think, had his eye on grandma when she was 18 or 19. They got married, but he would have seen her grow up in the outpost that our great grandfather and grandmother ran. So this book was written when, Warren?
2001, I guess.
Yeah. So it's a wonderful read if any of you are interested. Mm-hmm. This is another one of Warren's books. I didn't tell him I was going to do this, but I just decided to. So
well, I only did a small thing with that, but I'm very happy to be part of it.
Yeah, he edited it, but it's a great book for anybody writing about Indigenous history, or just Indigenous issues in general, for grammar, and also this one. So this was in Mom's collection, Warren.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's our collection of Indigenous literature stories of Manitoba.
Yeah.
And that was a wonderful, very fun project to work on with my friend Megan Sinclair.
Yeah, wonderful.
Thanks.
And this is these are just a few of the many things that Warren has contributed. So did I answer your question, Warren, or not?
I think so. And I think that idea of, enlarging the story is, that really is a theme that goes through. In a way, it really reminds me of your mom as well, in the way she would enlarge stories, and my dad too, and really the whole family, on our shared family. And in Lake of the Prairies, the book that you mentioned there, I have a lot of recollections there of the storytelling kind of competitions that people would get into, to see who could tell it the best. And so I think, yeah, I do think that idea of enlarging the story and going from maybe a small detail or a small remembered moment and finding the larger significance. So for me, I'm mostly a writer. Sort of accidentally became a photographer, but for me, that I always draw from those stories that we grew up with, and often ones that your mom told or that my dad told, and I will move them into different realms, but I'm just truly trying to enlarge that, the kernel of emotion or of insight or profundity that was in those stories that we grew up with. And so it's very interesting to see, you doing something similar within the visual realm.
Mm-hmm. And I guess too, when I say enlarge the stories, my mom had a big heart, and we lived in a low rental housing district. She was a single mom, supporting two daughters on minimum wage. Our table was always open. Whoever, she used to say to us, "Why don't you two just run away like everybody else's kids are doing?" But she would, friends would come over. They weren't getting along at home. They'd spend a week or however long living at our house until things calmed down, and then they'd go back. So she was really open, and she was way before her time. I feel really gifted to have known her, and somehow when Mom died, the work started moving through me. So I can't really explain that, but it is a fact. And before she died, she prepared an envelope of photographs that she said to me, "You're going to need these someday." And we had all these stories, and it was hard to sort out who was who, because there were always, that's my aunt or that's my cousin, but how are they linked to us? Because there were many of our ancestors were married once or twice. Spouses would die, they'd remarry, so there was a lot of blended families, and it was hard to figure out who was who, and people were called aunt and uncle even if they weren't related to you. So she gave me this envelope, and then when my friend Michelle Smith, who's Métis from Red River, volunteered to make a video for me about my attachment to that initial work at the museum in Manitoba, a work that is very distinctly Métis beading, but turned out to be made by a woman who was a Dene Métis and lived up around Athabasca. But when Michelle offered to make this film, she said, "Don't you have some material from your family?" And I thought, well, I have this envelope somewhere. I'm not sure what's in it. Found the envelope, and it was just, everything was documented, time, date, and people. So there it was. Mom was right. She knew that. I think somehow she had this mission in her life to pass these stories on, and I find it really rewarding now to particularly to see young beaters. I'm in a show at the Legacy Gallery here in Victoria, and to see the wonderful work from diverse nations of young beaters and different communities, people who identify as being part of the queer community, and it's just a really wonderful way to connect with others. And I guess that's I have a sense of pride of being part of that movement that is so meaningful to so many. And I also think it really serves a beading, and the attention to detail serves a function in calming our nervous systems. And I think in these days, many of us struggle with that, and I in particular do. And I find that, any tools that I can use, not that I'm not a successful beader the way a traditional beader, but I certainly have had my connections to beads in my life, and ended up in the work that I'm making. So yeah.
I wonder, I guess timing wise, if we've got time for maybe one other question or area of discussion, which sort of just derives out of what you were just saying, Daphne. It's I just the movement to the digital realm that you made. It seems that you're interested. I know you were a gardener. You were so interested in the natural world for your whole life. Moving into the digital realm, that sort of surprised me. I wasn't expecting you to do that. Where did that come from? And what was what were the, I guess, the the things that maybe surprised you in that process as well?
Well, I studied textile design for I don't know how long, maybe 3 years or so, and I got really, really sick from the chemicals. I mean, that at that time we were touching carcinogens all the time. The air was full of fumes, and I got very sick and basically I had to drop out of the program, and then later I attempted to go back to school at Concordia to study art, and as soon as they closed the windows and the doors, I would get sick. So basically, to me, it was like I had to give up on my art making, and um, and so I returned to gardening. My partner and I restored a well-known garden in the Sutton area of Quebec, in the southeastern townships. It had been owned by Evelyn Lambert, who was she was the first woman film animator at the National Film Board, and she and Norman McLaren were renowned for their work. And when she died, we purchased that property and then restored her garden. And at some point, I was just so full of, bird song, texture, colors. I had to do something, and Dawn set up this little studio in the basement where we left the windows and doors open, and I would wear the equivalent of a skidoo suit and big boots, and began to work with the materials, various materials, paint, and some of them made me sick, some of them didn't, but the whole place had to be, constantly have a constant source of fresh air. And eventually I discovered a way to work, and it involved the camera. And it involved the digital imagery, and then the work was clean. So that's how that ended up happening. It certainly wasn't a thought through thing, but it did happen. And at some point, I realized that I couldn't be a gardener and an artist, because because I was working with plant material, both of them happened in the summertime. And I moved from this very manicured garden. I was spending more and more time in the ditch, and I felt that I was really being called in a way that was, there was a path for me, and I took it. And fortunately, I've been very fortunate in that I've had publicly supported art. I've gotten government funding for my work. Otherwise, I couldn't do it. I couldn't make it. But I've been very fortunate in that, and I'm thankful.
I love that description of moving from the garden to the ditch and finding finding the wonders that are there, that are maybe neglected. And so I think that again just speaks to this idea of enlarging the story, of finding those things that people are taking for granted, and seeing the beauty in them as well.
Yeah, and the ditch. I mean, the ditch on the prairies. The ditches are really important habitats for all sorts of animals, birds, and insects, because as with habitat destruction, and the dedication to agribusiness, many of the animals and the flora and fauna are driven off the land. And where do they end up? They end up in the ditch. And so those corridors become survival routes. And that ties us back to the Métis people, right? Because our people were called, the roadside people.
Road allowance people,
yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, that's exactly the ditch. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the ditch. And so I think there's some beauty in that, because there's power in that ditch. Power and beauty in that ditch.
It's about survival despite, being pushed away from your territory. Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. And finding another way, because that's, I think, what many people did. Not that some people were gifted and others weren't, but there's our people scattered, and just even our family, Lebret, around the Swift Current area up north. We scattered everywhere. But somehow they managed to stay together too, visiting from all over.
That's right. Yeah, people, relatives showing up unannounced from, 15-hour drive. That was sort of normal within our family.
Yeah, and they wouldn't just be on their own. They'd have a car full of people, or maybe there'd be two cars.
That's right. And
Yeah.
that was just how we grew up. That was normal. And yeah, that the family was so spread out by people, needing to go somewhere for work or for other reasons, but always staying back, connected. And which was much more difficult to do back then, but people made the effort, absolutely.
Yeah, and they also use a telephone system by, I'll call and I'll ask for myself, and you say I'm not here, then I'm home. I mean, a lot of people did that, right? That was where we
Absolutely.
communicated.
Yes.
Yeah. Anyway,
Well, looking at our time here, I think maybe we're getting close to the end of our this part of our time. But I just want to ask Sarah what for advice on that.
Yeah, we are coming near to the end of our artist talk. If you had any more questions, you probably have a couple more minutes, but otherwise we can close things off. Up to you folks.
does anybody else have a question?
There is a question in the comments section for Daphne from Wendy Peart. She asks, Daphne, is there a particular plant that is particularly resonant to you as a metaphor or symbol of your heritage, past, or personal affinity?
Oh goodness, that's a really good question. Well, I love the wild rose. And yeah, I do. I really love the wild rose. Wonderful, scented, prickly, and it's represented in so much of Indigenous beading too. I think those thorny branches they're kind of reminiscent of grandma, and what the kind of prickly nature. And I think you hit on that, Warren, in the introduction to the Dunlop show. What kind of a prickly nature it takes to survive. What grandma did, and you said she did have 15 children, but she raised at least another 10. So by the time
Wow.
we came along, she was done with kids. She was moving on to world traveling and other adventures. Rightfully so.
Fantastic. All right. Well, thank you so much, Warren and Daphne, for sharing your knowledge and stories with us. And thank you to our viewers who are tuning in. We're going to move to our private discussion. So for those of you that are watching online, take care.
Thank you. Thanks for
And
letting
I'm just
me
going to
in.
run and turn this off on Eric's computer, folks. So just bear with me here.
Sarah's multitasking.